Across New England, commercial businesses of all sizes rely on Eastern Bank. We help clients grow by being able to answer their larger loan needs and by offering innovative solutions, smart decision-making, and one-on-one relationships. From franchise financing to community development and asset-based lending, our knowledgeable and experienced commercial team deeply understands your business and the communities you serve. See how we can help you meet your business goals at easternbank.com/commercial.
This is what it sounds like.
Member FDIC.
In late 2007, the remains of a young woman from the Casca Nation were discovered in the Yukon woods.
I always think about, I want to know what really happened.
So I travel north to try to understand what happened and who was involved.
It's a pretty big risk to come forward with the information that I have.
I'm David Ridgen, and this is Someone Knows Something, Season 8, The Angel Carlick Case. Available now.
Welcome to Say More from Boston Globe Opinion. I'm Shirley Leung. Mac and cheese, meatloaf, pancakes. Google a recipe and you will find 1,000 options. But who's behind those recipes? Two of them are my guests today, Kenji Lopez-Alt and Deb Perlman. They've written countless recipes and have millions of followers online. Kenji has some Boston roots and spent time in high-profile local kitchens. He's now a cookbook author and a New York Times columnist. Deb is the creator of Smitten Kitchen and has written 3 popular cookbooks herself. They've got a new podcast called The Recipe with Kenji and Deb. Every other week, these two cooks test each other's recipes and talk about it. I also love to dissect recipes online, and these two are the best. So I couldn't resist inviting them on the podcast. Kenji and Deb, welcome to Say More.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us on.
So you two are both big deals in the world of recipe writing. How did you decide to team up on a podcast?
Well, I actually just met Kenji 1 year ago. I was on a book tour for my 3rd cookbook, Smitten Kitchen Keepers. Kenji interviewed me on stage in Seattle, and we quickly discovered that if we started to talk about cooking and recipes, we could go on forever. And what better place for that than to start a podcast?
And it's been great because, you know, Deb and I have had sort of parallel career paths for almost over 15 years now, I think, where we were both sort of in the blogging world and started off like sort of in the old days of food blogs and saw it through sort of what blogging has become now and what the food on the internet has become now. So we've both been through a lot of sort of the same processes. So we just have a lot of stories. You know, it's like telling war stories. It's been a lot of fun.
So how do you decide what recipes you want to develop? I mean, what's step one?
Kenji and I have a list we've been kicking around of things we thought would be fun episode topics, and we're just working through it one by one. We started with an episode. We will start with an episode on stovetop mac and cheese because it's different from baked mac and cheese in a casserole. We're going to talk about meatloaf after that. And we've recorded an episode on pancakes. So I think these are really fun, classic topics with a lot of variation in recipes that give us a lot of things to discuss.
So both of you have a lot in common, but you're also very different. I mean, Kenji, you have this food science background, whereas Deb, you're a pioneer in home food blogging, writing more practical recipes. So how would you describe each other's superpower as recipe writers?
I would say that because of Kenji's deep knowledge of science and food chemistry and the way that ingredients are going to work together, he's able to write recipes that understand what they're doing at a really high level. And I think, home cooks who don't necessarily know these things benefit from that. Even when people aren't using Kenji's recipes, I think they're using things that they've learned from Kenji's recipes, whether or not they're crediting. And I think he's influenced home cooking in a very significant way over the last 15 years.
For Deb, I think her superpower is that she has the solutions, right? It's like if you have a problem that can be solved with a plate of food, Deb is the person who will tell you what that food is going to be and how to make it. And you can trust that when you're in her hands, you're going to come up with something that is delicious and most of the time, in fact, almost all the time, relatively simple, and one that sort of really balances the realities of everyday life, of life as a parent, of life as a person functioning in the world, with the desire to have something delicious on the table.
Give me an example of a solution.
Okay, so an easy one. So a couple months ago, we had a ton of blueberries at home. And my daughter asked for blueberry muffins. Usually we'll just make blueberry pancakes. My daughter asked for blueberry muffins. And so I was like, okay, who would I go to if I want to make what I know are going to be excellent blueberry muffins. I've never made a brand new recipe I've never made before, and I have very limited time to do it. And of course, Deb has a recipe for that exact situation, which we made, and they were delicious, and they were easy to make, and they came out tasting wonderful. So that's what I mean by like it's a solution to a real world problem that people often face. Because I feel like, sometimes with my recipes or sometimes with, say, like Cooks Illustrated, they assume that if you're going to be making this recipe, you are committing all the time you need to make the recipe exactly as written, even if it's like a 4-hour long recipe for blueberry muffins, right? You're the type of person who has 4 hours to make blueberry muffins. And sometimes I am that type of person, right? But sometimes I'm not. More often than not, I'm not. And so I need a solution for how do I make great blueberry muffins in half an hour.
I think a lot of the stuff that Kenji and I get into on the podcast are like the underlying question is like, when is a recipe perfect and what is a perfect recipe? And we don't have one answer. This isn't like, there isn't a competition. It's not like it's Kenji's recipe or mine.
Right.
It's just that we both are keeping different things in mind as we're getting towards this place of what we consider a perfect recipe. Sometimes I love a cooking project. I've got a lasagna bolognese on my site that could easily take you all day to make. But on each of it, I have this other side where I'm like, is this worth it? Is it definitely the simplest way to make it? Am I going to be crabby by the end of the day when I make it? Or am I going to be like, actually, this was the most triumphant piece of home cooking I've ever done. And I will do it again anytime I have time. I think there's room for everything.
Yeah, I think Kenji and I were talking earlier about a bolognese recipe that he has that I was reading, and it made me cry. I was like, I give up.
No. Kenji, what did you put in your bolognese that made her cry?
Well, it's not so much that it's that I put a lot of stuff in it.
Yes.
It's the bolognese she's referring to was based off the recipe that we used to make at Number 9 Park in Boston. The problem is that it has a ton of ingredients. It has ground beef, ground pork, ground lamb, chicken livers, wine, carrots, onions, celery. I think it calls for gelatin and stock.
Yes.
It calls for milk and cream, butter and olive oil, Parmesan. Probably calls for like fish sauce or something like that. Yeah, it's just like a ton of stuff. But it's like it's things that if you are a restaurant cook who's working at a restaurant that is attached to a butcher shop, you can make easily. If you're a home cook, it's not a Tuesday night dinner, So it's a commitment, and it also requires you to cook chicken livers, which I don't know. I feel safe in saying that the majority of people listening to this right now have not cooked a chicken liver in their life. I don't know. that would be my guess. But it's got some unusual ingredients and some new stuff, and requires more than one pot. And it's definitely not the bolognese I make at home on a regular basis.
That's the recipe I want. The one that you make at home. So
that
it was the
recipe's
chicken.
out there also. I have a simple bolognese recipe out there as well.
All right, I'm gonna go look at that. So, so both of you forged your recipe writing in the unforgiving world of the internet. I mean, there's full of commenters, and I know what that's like as a journalist. I get a lot of commenters and trolls. So how does that dynamic help or does it hurt the recipe development process?
I actually love recipe comments. I feel like they get a bad reputation, like recipe comments on internet websites, recipe sites, but I love it when people give feedback. I love when people tell me how it went in their kitchen. There's this sort of joke, like this archetype of this person who changed everything and then they leave it 1 star because it didn't come out. But I don't feel like that's as common as like, I'm not God in your kitchen. You should make it however it's going to work for you. Understand it might have a slightly different outcome, but I mean, I love hearing how people tweak it. And I've also found it very helpful in where I hear from readers and they will tell me, Deb, I'm not going to do that. Deb, you lost me with this step. And it doesn't mean I'm going to change it, but I'm going to have in mind that point where a lot of people are going to drop off, where they start to feel like it's not worth it. And I think that's so helpful to me in my recipe development to have those voices in my head, as long as they don't like drown out my actual creative energy.
For me, it was almost the same way that I tell people a lot, like, if you make a meal, there's very little you can do in the kitchen that's going to completely ruin a meal to the point that you can't eat it, right? So as long as you can eat something, I feel like you haven't failed in the kitchen. You've just given yourself another opportunity to do it. And the good thing about cooking is that we all eat like 3 times a day. So you get a lot of opportunities to practice, right? If you mess it up once, it's fine. You're going to forget about it. You can try it again next time. And I felt that way sort of about writing when I was writing online, that I could be as experimental as I wanted. I could try writing in different styles. I could do whatever I wanted because I was writing so much and getting such quick feedback that I could, if I wrote something and it didn't really land either with me or with the readers, no problem. Like there's another article coming up 2 days from now that maybe will hit better. So for me, it was a process. It was a learning process for me. It sort of allowed me to practice writing, allowed me to find my voice. As far as the community goes, I agree with Deb that I think recipe comments are great, whether they're positive or negative. And the people who change things and try it and report back, I think that's extremely useful. That's like something I could have taken the time to do myself and gotten information on, but someone just went and did it for me. And now I have information I didn't have before. And so anytime you're gaining new information or a new perspective on something, I think is useful information to have.
Well, I love it when I would love it when the cooks and chefs respond in the comment section and thank people for their response. So I love that. I actually love reading the comments on recipes, not so much on my own stories, but I love it on reading about recipes because I do love the community. So Deb, I've noticed on your website, you're very eager to give credit to others. I mean, you will say that your recipe is a riff on Martha Stewart or Joanne Chang. So I was wondering if you can explain that choice to embrace adapting recipes written by others.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for noticing. And second of all, I think it's a missing piece in recipes these days. I think, I didn't invent lasagna and I did not learn how to make macaroni and cheese in a vacuum. It does not mean that you have to credit every passing conversation about a roux or bechamel you've ever had. But I think that when something has pivoted the way you were making a recipe, or it's something you always keep in mind because of another place, I think it doesn't take away from the recipe to give credit. I think it adds to it. It's like a well-researched article. It's a story that encompasses the whole world, as opposed to just, I invented this, I am amazing, and it's just, I think it's a better head note and it's a more interesting head note. And then for the curious cook, it sends them to other places where they might learn more about cooking, or I get to talk about people who I think are cool cooks. So most of the time I'm changing quite a bit, enough that maybe I could legitimately call it mine, but I don't want to. I want to talk about the places where things come from because I think it's just more fun and more interesting.
I completely agree. I find that there's absolutely zero downside to referencing and crediting your sources, and a ton of upside. Like it makes you more legitimate as a writer because it shows, hey, this person didn't just pull this out of their butt. They actually went and did research and read other people's work on this and also experimented in the kitchen. So it lends more credibility to you as a writer. It lends more credibility to your recipe. Recipe writers, I think, could take a note from journalists and science writers and people who have these sort of more formal writing styles that really emphasize crediting sources because it backs up your story rather than detract from it.
More of my conversation with Kenji and Deb after this short break.
At Eastern Bank, we believe that growing business should also grow the community. That's why we work to give all business owners what they need to take their dreams to the next level. Our dedication to small businesses and communities has inspired us to create the Equity Alliance for Business program and become the #1 SBA lender in Massachusetts for 15 years running. We're proud to be here for all businesses, big and small. See the good we can do for you by visiting easternbank.com/business.
This is what it sounds like.
Member FDIC.
Okay, so let's talk about your first podcast episode. It's stovetop mac and cheese. So why did you choose that recipe?
It's delicious.
It's delicious. It's easy.
It's easy. It's delicious. I feel like everybody needs a back pocket recipe for a stovetop mac and cheese.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think macaroni and cheese was a good starting point because it is extremely simple, but a lot of times simple foods have the most interesting things to talk about because slight changes in technique or slight changes in ingredients can have a very vast effect on the end result. So something like a bolognese with 20 ingredients, if you sub out, leave out the chicken livers, it's not going to destroy the dish, right? If you leave out the whatever ingredient I had in there, like, or if you alternate, it's not going to destroy the dish. But like my macaroni and cheese recipe has 3 ingredients, right? It's macaroni, it's pasta, evaporated milk, and cheese, and that's it, right? And so each one of those ingredients plays a sort of vital role in the final product, and so I find it really interesting to talk about what those ingredients bring, and how to achieve sort of similar but different results using the ingredients that Deb uses, so butter and flour and milk. And cheese. So both of them can get you to a place that you might want to be, but they both get you there very different ways. And so I find that fascinating to find that we both started with the same starting point, the same access to ingredients, and the same sort of end goal in mind, like a 15-minute stovetop, super simple, something I throw together after I come in from a snowy day type recipe, but we ended up at such very different places. So I find that really interesting to compare the paths we took.
I thought it was the perfect first recipe to talk about. I mean, who doesn't like mac and cheese? And I've never made stovetop mac and cheese. I mean, not from scratch. I've always used the box. I'm a Martha Stewart bake mac and cheese kind of cook, and I make it, Thanksgiving, Christmas, I grate my own cheese. But Kenji, I have one question about your 3 ingredient mac and cheese. You lost me when you said that you put frozen peas or broccoli in your mac and cheese.
Yeah.
I was that in my book, that's an unholy alliance.
Oh God, just wait till you hear this. I'm actually working on a recipe. So I'm writing an article for the New York Times right now. It's about frozen foods and why smaller foods freeze better than bigger foods. And in fact, it's specifically prompted by a reader question about why peas freeze so much better than other types of vegetables do. But the recipe that I'm writing to accompany with it is called macaroni and peas. And it's essentially a macaroni and cheese recipe, but with a very large amount of peas in it.
Oh, no.
Oh, my God.
Deb, what did you say on the podcast? You said something your kids would have you arrested if you...
My kids would throw it at me. Like, my kids would, they would. I one time tried to put broccoli florets in, just small chopped in the macaroni and cheese, because I thought this is great. They like broccoli, they like macaroni and cheese, and they were so betrayed. They were so upset. Like, I have never seen my kids eat less of anything I've made, especially with everything that... Oh, it was like a year ago.
Wait, how old are they? How are they now?
To clarify, my son was 13 and my daughter was 7 a year ago. It was like a year ago. They were like, they just walked away. Like they just wouldn't do it. And so I tend to keep things separate.
Yep.
If you have kids who let you mix things, that's
thing.
beautiful. Please enjoy
separate.
it.
Yeah.
But I also theorize that if you actually have like a bowl of macaroni and cheese and a bowl of broccoli, you're actually going to end up eating a lot more broccoli on the side than you ever would to be able to tuck it into something. So that's how I've made, I don't know, lemonade out of the humiliation.
That's because for you, the goal there, so I guess not the whole goal, but part of the goal is to get your kids to eat more vegetables. Is that
Absolutely.
Got it.
So you both are parents, and I have 2 kids, 11 and 13. And I have to say, having children destroyed my cooking ambitions. For some reason, I decided once I had my first kid, I refuse to touch raw meat. It's too much work. I don't want to clean up. Like, I am winning when I buy the, frozen chicken stir fry from Trader Joe's. And as we all know, the chicken's already pre-cooked, and so has having kids changed the way you cook?
I actually have many times joked that I think it's actually good for somebody who's a recipe developer or cookbook writer to have a very picky kid to keep them in check. Like, it's good. It's humbling. It's almost like the worst commenters are in the room with you. And if you do not feed them, it will also be your problem, because later they'll ask for food. So it sounds like you guys have experienced this.
So Debbie, are your recipes simpler, faster? What's different?
I think that they're definitely more doable, and a lot of them are made. A lot of times I've been working on the recipe in the background. I might work on it during the workday. I might work, I'm kind of working on it, like just trying to see where it's going to go. But then one day it's 5:30 p.m. and dinner hasn't been made and hungry children are going to need to eat, and I have to execute it. And all of a sudden I realized that I didn't need to like pre-chop the onion, or I didn't need to reconstitute the better than bouillon broth before I made the soup, that I could just do it in the pot. Little things appear when I do it sort of in this rushed panic that I think everybody wins from. So a lot of those things have happened. A lot of my better recipe breakthroughs have happened because I was procrastinating and am now under the gun to get dinner done.
So because, a lot of people are, two working parents, you got kids, your kids have busy schedules. So often what happens is you just make the same foods over and over again, week after week. So how do we break out of our rut?
This is something I think about a lot because I want us to have the same excitement and fun with cooking and delight in the outcome that we used to have before, when we had more time or when it was more of a hobby and less like something we did to keep to occasionally grumpy and opinionated people that we put on this earth for love and joy happy. And so a lot of the things that I'm thinking about when I'm developing recipes is, yes, is it great? Yes, is it doable? But also, like, do I feel good about this? Because I want it to be like, I just made this buffalo chicken salad on like a Monday night, or I made this tomato soup in a very short period of time, and it was awesome. And I got to use up like an old ingredient in my fridge. So I think about that stuff a lot because I think that I'm definitely one of these people who, if I'm having an okay day, but I make something I love for dinner, I have suddenly just rewritten the script of my day, and I feel like really happy about it. And I want to, it's a high bar, but I think anytime you can provide that experience for somebody, or anytime somebody can have it, it's like a very cool thing to do.
For me, I as a person, personally, I often feel the opposite. That like, oh, I wish I was able to just say, all right, every Tuesday is taco night. I wish I was able to say that because my kids would be happy, my wife would be happy. It would be like a no-brainer dinner for Tuesday. But I just can't. Like, it's like I need to make something different every time.
Kenji, you can come to my house if you want Taco Tuesday every Tuesday.
I mean, I love Taco Tuesday. I'm not putting it down. We do it maybe once every other month or so, but. But for me, it's like the exercise of trying to put myself into the shoes of someone who is not a professional recipe writer, and really sort of limiting when I can cook and what I'm cooking. I think naturally ends up. It's like if I do that, then I end up in a position where I'm sort of similar to a lot of what my readers are. And so if I feel excited about something, hopefully like there's an overlap and they'll feel excited about something as well. And they'll be under the sort of the same types of constraints that I am, in that, like, yeah, there's your kitchen has a sort of set of ingredients that you work from. And if you want, here's a way you can mix up what you're making using those same ingredients, or maybe adding one other one, or maybe changing the technique a little bit.
So last question. So who would be a historical figure or current celebrity you would love to cook for?
So Jacques Pepin, I think he's, sort of has been since I started cooking, since I was a kid till now, like one of my cooking idols. And every time I learn more about him and see, the next thing he's doing, it like makes me admire him more. Like he is like an incredible resume, incredible amount of experience, but he's such like a down to earth, super humble, really nice guy. So
Kenji, let's say he's coming over for dinner. What would you cook for him?
I haven't thought about that, but certainly something involving eggs, because I know he's a big egg fan, and like I love eggs. I know he loves eggs, and I've learned a ton about eggs from him. So I would hopefully, I don't know, maybe I would do something like the Cantonese style scrambled eggs that in my book in the wok, where you cook them in a wok. Like you get a wok really hot, you scramble the eggs with a little bit of fish sauce, you coat the wok in lard and then pour it out, and then you kind of pour the eggs over the surface of the wok, and you cook it really, really quickly, but only on one side. And then as you put it onto the plate, you kind of ruffle it up almost like a flag. And so you get this kind of like wave of scrambled egg it's like almost like a crepe of egg that has very, very loosely set scrambled eggs on top of it, which I think is a unique way to cook scrambled eggs that maybe he hasn't seen. I don't know.
I bet he would love that.
That sounds amazing. What about you, Deb? Who would you cook for? Oh
my God, my answer is not going to be as serious. I've always thought, would it be fun if you could have like Dorothy Parker over for dinner and she could just like be mean about everything and everyone? I just think of people who I want around the table who I want to give some wine to and get them to like mouth off. That's really what I want. Like the food, I don't know. Maybe I'd make like a good soup. I'll make something good, but I want to hear her talk. So maybe get her drunk.
I love that. I love that. Well, Deb and Kenji, this has been so much fun. And I'm excited to become a devoted listener of your new podcast, The Recipe with Kenji and Deb from Radiotopia. Deb Perlman is the creator behind the award-winning blog Smitten Kitchen and a writer of cookbooks. And Kenji Lopez Alt is host of Kenji's Cooking Show on YouTube. He is a columnist and a cookbook writer. Thank you for both joining me on Say More.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Say More is a production of the Boston Globe. Today's episode was produced by Anna Kusmer with help from Alexis Sargent and Scott Hellman. Our editor is Jim Dow. Our engineer is Uzair Ahmed. Our music is from APM Music. If you like the show, please follow us and leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can email us at saymore@globe.com. I'm Shirley Leung. Thanks for listening.